First contact of a different kind. Kira Zaks adjusted her white science uniform for the fifth time that morning. Her pale blue hands smoothed down the fabric as she stared at her reflection in the transport tube. Today was her first day at the Galactic Research Center, and everything had to be perfect. The young Nixilian scientist had worked too hard to let anything go wrong. Arrival in 2 minutes, the transport's AI announced. Welcome to Sector 7, Xenobiology Division. She touched the emotional suppression implant behind her left ear, a standard device all Nixilians received on their 10th birthday. The small metal disc hummed softly, keeping her biological responses in check. Her people took great pride in being the most controlled species in the galaxy. No messy emotions, no unpredictable biological responses, pure logic and science. The transport doors opened with a soft hiss. Kira Zaks stepped out into the bright hallway, her tablet clutched tightly against her chest. Other scientists hurried past, some with tentacles, others with multiple heads, and a few that were just clouds of floating gas. This was the heart of galactic research, where the brightest minds studied new species. "Ah, you must be junior researcher Kira Zaks," a deep voice called out. A tall Varaxian with gray scales approached her, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence. "I'm senior researcher Zexthor. Welcome to the Human Studies Division." Kira Zaks bowed slightly. "Thank you, senior researcher. I've read all the preliminary reports on humans. Such an interesting species, achieving space travel despite their emotional instability." Zexthor made a clicking sound that passed for laughter among his kind. "Yes, they're quite the puzzle. Come, the observation room is this way. The human diplomatic team is having their morning meeting. Perfect timing for your first day." They entered a large room with one-way observation windows looking down into a conference room. Several humans sat around a table, drinking something dark from cups and talking animatedly. Kira Zaks pulled out her tablet, ready to take notes on their behavior. That's when it happened. One of the humans, a male with black hair and warm brown eyes, looked up. Somehow, impossibly, he seemed to look right through the one-way window and directly into her eyes. Kira Zaks felt something she had never experienced before. Heat bloomed in her chest, spreading rapidly through her body. The spots along her arms, natural bioluminescent markers all Nixilians had, began to glow with a soft pink light. Her knees felt weak, and her heart started beating so fast she could hear it. "Junior researcher." Zexthor's voice seemed far away. "Are you glowing?" Kira Zaks tried to respond, but her voice wouldn't work. The emotional suppression implant whirred loudly, trying to control whatever was happening to her body. She watched in horror as the human male smiled at something his colleague said, and her spots glowed even brighter. "This is unprecedented," Zexthor muttered, pulling out his own tablet to scan her. "Your biological readings are off the charts. But that's impossible. Nixilians haven't experienced heat cycles in over 10,000 years. Kira Zaks finally found her voice, though it came out as a squeak. Who is he?" "That's Dr. James Chen, the human team's xenobiologist." Zexthor was still scanning her, his 4 eyes wide with scientific curiosity. "Fascinating. Your body is producing chemicals that haven't been seen in our species since before the Great Suppression." Below, Dr. Chen took another sip from his cup, completely unaware that he had just triggered the first Nixilian mating response in 10 millennia. Kira Zaks wanted to die of embarrassment as her spots pulsed with a bright pink glow. This was definitely not how she had planned her first day to go. Biology lessons. Kira Zaks sat alone in her small research pod, surrounded by floating holographic screens. It was 3 a.m. station time, but she couldn't sleep. Not after the disaster of her first day. Her spots still hadn't stopped glowing completely, though they had dimmed to a faint pink. "Computer, show me human biochemistry data again," she said, rubbing her tired eyes. The screen shifted, displaying complex molecular structures. The door chimed. Kira Zaks quickly pulled on her lab coat to hide her glowing spots. "Enter." Senior researcher Zexthor slithered in, all four eyes focused on his tablet. Still working. Good. The Council is very interested in your reaction to the human. Kirazax's spots flared brighter at the mention of Dr. Chen. She pulled the coat tighter. I think I found something. Look at this. She waved her hand, bringing up two rotating molecular models. Human pheromones shouldn't affect us. We evolved on different planets. But these structures... Impossible, Zexthor whispered, moving closer to the display. That's the exact shape of ancient Nixilian mating triggers. From before the Great Suppression. Exactly. Kirazax stood up excitedly, forgetting about hiding her spots. Somehow, humans naturally produce chemicals that match our species' oldest biological responses. The chances of this evolving by accident are 1 in several trillion. A new voice finished. Kirazax froze. That voice. She turned slowly to find Dr. James Chen standing in her doorway, holding a steaming cup of coffee. Her spots instantly lit up like a festival display. Sorry to interrupt, he said, smiling apologetically. The light was on, and I was hoping to discuss some research. He trailed off, staring at her glowing spots with obvious fascination. I... Kirazax couldn't form words. Her emotional suppression implant was making a concerning whining noise. Zexthor looked between them, his scales rippling with scientific excitement. Dr. Chen. Perfect timing. We were just discussing human biochemical compatibility with ancient Nixilian biology. Would you be interested in participating in some tests? Tests? James and Kirazax asked simultaneously. Her spots pulsed brighter. Nothing invasive, Zexthor assured them. Just some proximity experiments to measure the strength of the reaction. For science, of course. The implant behind Kirazax's ear sparked suddenly. She yelped, clapping a hand over it. A small curl of smoke rose between her fingers. James stepped forward, concerned. Are you okay? The closer he got, the more her spots glowed. The implant sparked again. I'm fine. Totally fine. Just need to. She backed away until she hit her desk. Computer. Emergency transport to Medical Bay. The last thing she saw before the transport beam took her was James's worried face. Her treacherous brain couldn't help noticing how handsome he looked when he was concerned. In the Medical Bay, the doctor scanned her malfunctioning implant. Fascinating. The device is being overwhelmed by natural hormones it was never designed to suppress. When was your last maintenance check? Last month, Kirazax mumbled, trying not to think about warm brown eyes and gentle smiles. Her spots betrayed her thoughts anyway, pulsing with a soft pink light. The doctor shook her head. Well, we can't repair it tonight. You'll have to wait until morning. Try to avoid any triggering situations until then. Kirazax groaned. Tomorrow morning, she was supposed to start her official research partnership with Dr. James Chen. Her spots glowed at just the thought of it. This was going to be a very long night. Cultural clash. The research lab felt uncomfortably small with James, sitting just 3 feet away from Kirazax. Her broken emotional suppression implant hung uselessly behind her ear, occasionally making sad little beeping sounds. Her spots hadn't stopped glowing all morning. So James said, looking at his tablet instead of at her, which she appreciated, should we talk about what's happening? Kirazax wanted to sink through the floor. It's just a small biological malfunction. Nothing to worry about. Small. James raised an eyebrow. Your entire species suppressed these reactions for 10,000 years. That seems pretty significant to me. Before she could respond, 3 young Nixilian scientists walked past the lab's glass wall. They stopped and stared at her glowing spots, whispering among themselves. Kirazax heard the words primitive and embarrassing before they moved on. James frowned. That wasn't very nice of them. They're right, though, Kirazax said quietly. We evolved past these urges. The Great Suppression saved our species from being controlled by primitive biological drives. Now I'm just. Her spots pulsed sadly. But who decided those drives were primitive? James turned to face her directly. Her spots immediately brightened. Sorry, he said, turning away again. But seriously, on Earth, we learn to work with our biology, not against it. How do you handle it? Kira Zax asked, genuinely curious. All these feelings and reactions and urges. James laughed softly. We embrace them. Sure, we have rules and social norms, but we don't try to suppress who we are. Our emotions make us stronger, help us connect with each other. The lab door slid open and senior researcher Zexthor entered, followed by 2 members of the Nixilian High Council. Kira Zax jumped to her feet, trying to look professional despite her glowing spots. Junior researcher, one council member said coldly, your condition has become concerning. You will report to Medical Bay 7 for emergency suppression treatment. Emergency suppression. James stood up too. That sounds serious. Is it safe? The council member ignored him. This situation threatens the stability of our society. Already, 3 other Nixilians have reported unusual reactions after prolonged exposure to humans. We cannot allow this contamination to spread. Contamination. James's voice rose slightly. She's experiencing natural biological responses. How is that contamination? Kira Zax felt something new, watching James defend her. Her spots shifted from pink to a deep purple, a color she'd never seen them produce before. Fascinating, Zexthor muttered, scanning her. That color indicates emotional resonance. It hasn't been observed in our species since. Enough. The council member snapped. Junior researcher, come with us now. But Kira Zax didn't move. For the first time in her life, she felt angry. Why? She asked. Why is feeling things wrong? Why is connecting with others primitive? Because it makes us weak, the second council member said, like humans. James laughed suddenly. Everyone turned to look at him. Sorry, he said, not looking sorry at all. But humans have explored more of space in 50 years than your species has in 1,000. We've made friends with 15 alien races while you've made research subjects of them. If this is weakness, maybe you should try it. Kira Zax's spots blazed with purple light. The council members stepped back, looking alarmed. Medical Bay 7, they repeated. 1 hour. Do not be late. They turned and left quickly, as if afraid her condition might be contagious. James looked at her glowing spots. Purple suits you, he said softly. Kira Zax had 1 hour to decide. Follow 10,000 years of tradition, or risk everything for a chance to feel. Her spots already knew her answer. The revelation. Instead of going to Medical Bay 7, Kira Zax found herself in the main research lab with James and senior researcher Zexthor. Her spots still glowed purple, matching the soft light of the holographic displays around them. Look at this, Zexthor said, his 4 eyes wide with excitement. We've been analyzing your genetic data from the past 3 days. He waved one scaled hand, bringing up a complex DNA model. James leaned closer to the display. That doesn't look like normal Nixilian DNA. Because it's not, Kira Zax whispered. She'd been staring at the results for 10 minutes, hardly believing what she saw. These are dormant genes. Ancient ones. They're waking up. Exactly. Zexthor's tail twitched with scientific excitement. The human pheromones aren't triggering a mating response. They're triggering genetic memory. The lab door slid open. 5 more Nixilian scientists rushed in, their spots glowing in various shades of pink and purple. Behind them came Dr. Sarah Wong, another human researcher. It's spreading, one of the Nixilians said, trying to hide her glowing spots. We all started showing symptoms after working with Dr. Wong. Kira Zax looked at her own DNA display again. We're not sick, she said slowly. We're remembering. Remembering what? Asked Sarah. Who we used to be. Kira Zax touched her broken implant. Before the Great Suppression, our species was different. More emotional, more connected. The records say we were too primitive, too unstable. But what if that wasn't true? James studied the DNA model. These dormant genes, they're not just about emotions, are they? No, Zexthor confirmed. They're linked to telepathic abilities, empathic bonding, even cellular regeneration. Abilities our species lost after the Great Suppression. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the station. Red lights flashed in the corridors. Emergency lockdown initiated. The station AI announced, "All Nixilian personnel report to quarantine immediately. Human contact has been designated a Level 1 biological hazard." "They're going to separate us," Sarah said. "Stop the research." "It's worse than that." Zexthor pulled up a new display showing official orders. "The Council is preparing to cut all contact with Earth. They're calling it a species-wide contamination risk." Kirazax felt something strange, a tingling in her mind. She looked at the other affected Nixilians and saw their spots pulsing in sync with hers. Without the implants suppressing them, their natural abilities were getting stronger. "Can you feel that?" one of them asked. "It's like we're connected." James watched in amazement as their spots created patterns of light between them. "This is what your species gave up." "Why?" "Control," Kirazax said bitterly. "They thought emotions made us weak. But look at humans. You feel everything so strongly, yet you've achieved so much." The station AI spoke again. "All Nixilian personnel must report for emergency treatment within 30 minutes. Non-compliance will result in forced quarantine." Kirazax looked at James, then at her fellow awakened Nixilians. Their spots pulsed together, creating a beautiful light show of pink and purple. "We need to show them the truth," she said. "This isn't a disease to be cured. It's evolution trying to correct a 10,000-year-old mistake." "How?" Sarah asked. "The Council won't listen." Kirazax smiled as she felt the new connection with her kind grow stronger. "They don't have a choice. The change has already started. And soon, they'll realize what we've lost, and what we could be again." The countdown to quarantine continued as two species faced a revelation that would change them both forever. Breaking free. The quarantine alarms were still blaring when Kirazax felt the first real telepathic connection of her life. It wasn't just emotions now. Actual thoughts flowed between her and the other awakened Nixilians. Their spots pulsed in perfect harmony, filling the lab with waves of pink and purple light. "They're coming," one of the connected Nixilians warned. Through their new link, everyone saw the security teams moving through the station. James checked the lab's security feed. 3 minutes until they reach us. Any ideas?" "I have one," Kirazax said, "but it's crazy." She turned to the small group of awakened Nixilians. "The archives say our ancestors could share memories through touch, if we can remember how." She didn't need to finish. The others moved into a circle, joining hands. Their spots blazed so brightly that James and Sarah had to shield their eyes. Thousands of years of suppressed memories flooded through them. Moments of joy, love, and connection that their ancestors had experienced. The true history of their species, untouched by the Council's careful editing. "Security teams approaching Lab Section 7, the station AI announced. Kirazax broke away from the circle, stumbling. James caught her before she fell. Her spots flickered between deep purple and bright gold. Another new color. "Are you okay?" he asked. "Better than okay," she said, smiling. "We remember everything now. What we were, what we could be again." She looked at the other awakened Nixilians. "Ready?" They nodded, their spots glowing with determination. The lab doors slid open. Council security forces rushed in, holding suppression devices. Behind them came the Council members themselves. "This ends now," the lead Council member declared. "You will all submit to treatment." "Why?" Kirazax asked. "Because we make you remember what you're afraid of." "We are not afraid," the Council member snapped. "We are evolved." Superior, we left behind these primitive urges for a reason. Let us show you the real reason, Kirizak said. Before anyone could stop her, she reached out and grabbed the council member's hand. The connection was instant. Through their touch, the council member saw everything. The true history, the beauty of their lost abilities, the strength that came from feeling instead of suppressing. The council member's spots, dormant for decades, began to glow. No, they whispered. This isn't. We can't. But it was too late. The awakening spread through the room like wildfire. Every Nixilian whose suppression implant had started failing felt the connection. Security officers dropped their weapons as their own spots began to glow. Don't fight it, Kirizak said gently. Remember who we really are. James watched in amazement as the room filled with pulsing lights of pink, purple, and gold. It's beautiful, he said softly. Kirizak felt his wonder through her new abilities and smiled. This is just the beginning. Our species didn't evolve past emotions. We were forced to suppress them. But now, the station's AI interrupted. Warning. Unusual biological readings detected in 43% of Nixilian population. Emotional suppression implant failures reported station-wide. The lead council member, spots now glowing softly, looked at their shaking hands. What have we done? All these years. We can help them, Kirizak said, squeezing James's hand. Humans reminded us how to feel. Now we can remember how to be whole again. The quarantine alarms finally fell silent as a new chapter in Nixilian history began, one written in glowing spots and awakened hearts. The choice. 1 week after the Great Awakening, the Galactic Research Station was divided. Half of the Nixilian population now glowed with newfound emotions, while the other half clung desperately to their suppression implants. The station had become a miniature version of the crisis spreading across Nixilian space. Kirizak stood before the emergency council meeting, her spots glowing with a calm golden light. James sat in the audience, giving her an encouraging smile. You have caused an epidemic, the first speaker said, his implant humming loudly to keep his own spots dim. Millions of Nixilians are rejecting their implants. Our society is falling into chaos. Is it chaos? Kirizak asked. Or is it freedom? The chamber erupted in argument. Awakened Nixilians' spots flashed in rainbow colors, while the suppressed ones gripped their seats tightly. Look at what these emotions do, the first speaker shouted. They make us unstable, unpredictable. They make us stronger, Kirizak countered. She touched the empty spot where her implant used to be. In 1 week, we've rediscovered abilities our species lost millennia ago. Telepathy, empathy, cellular regeneration. What else did we sacrifice for your perfect control? A young council member stood up, her own spots beginning to glow faintly. The human database shows their emotional species has explored more space in 50 years than we have in 1,000. Perhaps we were wrong. Lies. The first speaker slammed his hand down. We have a solution. A new, stronger suppression implant. Mandatory for all Nixilians. We will end this deviation. Kirizak felt James's worry spike through her empathic senses. She sent back a feeling of reassurance before addressing the council again. You can't force us back into the dark, she said. Every Nixilian deserves the choice, to feel or not to feel, to be what we once were or what you made us. And if we choose to remain as we are, someone asked. Then that's your right, Kirizak replied. But it must be a choice, not a law. The first speaker's implant sparked suddenly. His spots flickered briefly before he forced them dark again. You see, even my own biology betrays me. We cannot allow this to continue. Security forces entered the chamber, carrying boxes of new implants. Last chance, junior researcher, the first speaker said. Accept the new implant or face exile from Nixilian space. Kirizak felt James stand up behind her. Through their growing empathic bond, she felt his support, his care, his She blushed as her spots turned bright pink. "I choose freedom," she said firmly. "I choose to feel. And I'm not alone." Half the chamber erupted in glowing spots as awakened Nixilians stood with her. Even some of the suppressed ones were removing their implants, spots flickering to life like stars appearing at dusk. The first speaker watched in horror as his perfect order crumbled. His own implant sparked again. And this time, he couldn't stop his spots from glowing. "This is not over," he said, but his voice shook. "Those who reject the implants will be cut off from our society. You will lose everything." Kirazax looked at James, then at her fellow awakened Nixilians. Her spots pulsed with gold and pink light. "No," she said softly. "We're finally getting everything back." The chamber filled with multicolored light as more Nixilians made their choice. The old order was ending, but something beautiful was being born in its place. And it had all started with just one look at a human. Evolution of the heart. 1 year after the Great Awakening, Kirazax stood at the podium of the new Nixilian Academy, her spots glowing with confident golden light. The audience before her was a sea of colors. Both awakened and suppressed Nixilians sat together, along with humans and other alien species. "When I first met Dr. James Chen," she said, smiling at her now husband in the front row, "my emotional suppression implant broke. I thought it was the worst thing that could happen to me. Instead, it was the best thing that ever happened to our species." Holographic displays showed the data from her year-long research project. Human contact didn't contaminate us. It reminded us of who we are. In just 1 year, awakened Nixilians have made more scientific discoveries than in the previous decade. Our telepathic and empathic abilities have revolutionized medicine, exploration, and diplomacy. The first speaker, now retired and glowing with his own gentle blue spots, nodded in agreement from his seat. His own awakening had come 3 months after the council meeting, when his granddaughter had been born glowing with natural spots. "Some chose to keep their implants," Kirazax continued. "And that's okay. Freedom means choosing your own path. But for those who awakened, we discovered something amazing." She waved her hand, bringing up new genetic scans. "Our DNA isn't just recovering lost abilities. It's evolving new ones. The combination of human biochemistry and our ancient genes has triggered changes we never imagined possible. We're becoming something new, something better than either of our original forms." James stood up and joined her at the podium, taking her hand. Their spots synchronized automatically, creating a beautiful pattern of gold and pink light. "The first human Nixilian baby will be born next month," he announced, placing his other hand on Kirazax's slightly swollen belly. Her spots turned bright pink with happiness. "Initial scans show she'll have both human emotional depth and Nixilian telepathic abilities. She represents the next step in both our species' evolution." The audience erupted in applause. Even the still suppressed Nixilians seemed moved by the moment, their implants working overtime to control their reactions. "1 year ago, I thought I was suffering from primitive urges," Kirazax said, squeezing James's hand. "But there was nothing primitive about it. Love, whether between species or within them, isn't a weakness. It's the greatest strength in the universe." She touched her glowing spots, remembering how embarrassed she'd been when they first lit up. Sometimes the heart knows better than the head. Sometimes what looks like a step backward is really a leap forward. And sometimes, she smiled at James, all it takes is one look to change everything. The ceremony ended with a surprise. The station AI announcing the approval of the first Nixilian human cultural exchange program. Soon, more humans would visit Nixilian space, and more Nixilians would travel to Earth. Both species would grow, learn, and evolve together. Later that night, as Kirazax and James watched the stars from their quarters, she felt their baby's first telepathic touch. Her spots glowed with pure joy as she shared the moment with her husband through their empathic bond. "Thank you," she whispered to him. "For what?" "For looking up at the right moment, 1 year ago. For helping me be brave enough to feel. For everything." James kissed her glowing spots softly. Thank you for teaching me that science's greatest discoveries often come from the heart. Their spots pulsed together, adding new colors to the eternal dance of evolution and love among the stars.